So let's get into the main story this week. Check this out. Of course, you'll immediately recognize from the picture there, Naomi Osaka. So yeah, this is an interesting one. Basically, Nissin, everybody piling on. First of all, Naomi Osaka, I watched live the Australian Open final. And I'm not a tennis person, but I watched basically from the second set. I was taking my son to swimming lessons. I came home, and I watched the match points that Naomi had, and then I watched her meltdown basically and get frustrated and punch her racket on her foot and walk off the court crying, going to the bathroom. And yeah, I saw that meltdown, and I thought, well, given that the only other tennis match I'd seen was her versus Serena, where Serena kind of did the same thing. I was like, oh, maybe tennis is just like this. People just freak out all the time. But no, I'm told this was actually for both players. This was complete breakdowns and recoveries in the middle of this game, and it's being pegged as this game where she won, winning 2 Opens in a row. This was an epic win, and it was fantastic to watch, and huge congratulations. In the meantime, people are anticipating Naomi's coming up greatness. The sponsors, the media, of course the media now, oh yes, she's all Japanese, we're all behind her, which is sort of great. There's great significance about that I'm about to talk about. Sponsors piling in as well, also great. It's great for her personally as well to have Japanese advertisers and so on, and get in and support her as a role model for young Japanese people. So it did raise some eyebrows when Nissin, the cup Noodle, one of the sponsors, both of Kei Nishikori and Naomi Osaka, the two top, and remember, Naomi represents Japan on the circuit. She flies under that flag, even though her father is Haitian, so her mother is Japanese. Obviously, Haiti doesn't sponsor a tennis team, so it always made more sense to take her Japanese nationality, and she was born in Japan and lived in Japan until she was 4 years old, so she's a Japanese citizen. To fly to basically go under the Japanese flag for these events. However, when the cartoon came out, basically an animated cartoons showing these two tennis stars, something did grab by McNeil's attention. And as a author of color, actually, I'm a huge fan of his books, particularly Hi, My Name is Loco and I'm a Racist, talking about his experience growing up in a Black Panther community, and then coming out of that and dealing with the way he was indoctrinated, and how that conflicted with and sometimes reinforced views in the real world. And he's a really fantastic writer, and he wrote up his sort of take on this, that please, Japan, don't be whitening, don't be trying to take. Finally, now Japan actually is becoming multi-ethnic. It's becoming multiracial. I talked the other week about how at the coming of age ceremony in Shinjuku in Tokyo, 47% of the 20-year-olds that came for coming of day ceremony in Shinjuku were foreigners, or ethnically foreign. In fact, no, it's actually foreign citizens, so probably ethnically foreign would be even more than that. So, Japan is becoming rapidly, multi-ethnic. Compared to when I got here, and there's less than 1% of the population were foreigners, and basically anyone who looked like Naomi Osaka was such a minority that people could say, yeah, there's a few people like that, but there's such an insignificant, minority that basically we can say Japan is homogenous. Japan is really changing. I mean, with the population, with the birth rate going down, and the number of international marriages producing births, with multicultural kids now. And the number of those kids that are now coming up in sports, in culture, and not setting aside the fact that, of course, the richest man in Japan, Masayoshi Son, is Korean, for example. Fujio Cho, CEO of Toyota, Korean heritage. You've got all of these people from diverse ethnic and cultural backgrounds being successful. You have Naomi Osaka coming up. So basically, you have basically Japanese of color. You have Japanese people who have mixed African heritage. And in her case, Caribbean heritage. And this is great. It's great for Japanese getting accustomed to the idea that they live in a multi-ethnic society. It's also great for the kids growing up, to basically see role models that look like themselves that they can relate to. So my McNeil's shock at this was, so finally there's a up and coming tennis star, a Japanese of color. And yet the anime which they put out to promote her, this super cool world tennis champion, I mean, seriously, she doesn't even look Japanese. She looks Caucasian. She looks like my mom. I mean, yeah. So From an African American perspective, which Bai is very good at expressing, of course, you could immediately see this in a sinister light. You can see this as the old, literally whitewashing, right? Like taking, like in Hollywood, playing Gandhi with a white person, for example, playing, in Short Circuit, people blackening up their faces, or white people playing roles of, of people of color, different ethnicities, because they assume that it'll be more palatable and popular if they're white. And with the big culture and race debate in America, and through that lens, looking at Japan, this looks pretty terrible. And you would think, coming from America, how could anyone do this? But the point is, this isn't America, and this isn't the same sort of era or the same sort of mindset as America. So the first thing is to understand the context, and Nissin themselves they tried to explain. They said, look, it wasn't intentional. They're coming for me, La Migra. So we had here basically their apology. In fact, where is the text of it? It must be at the top here, actually. Alright, so they've got the ad that's been taken down, and where is the apology? Well, they apologized, and they basically said it wasn't intentional. And people would say, well, if you come from a place like America, you say, how is it not intentional? Surely you see everything as race. And what they pointed out is that, and actually the sort of news article kind of points out, this is not just in anime, by the way, as well. There is a thing in Japanese culture, and some people interpret it as looking up to white people and wanting to be white. It's not exactly that. It's not that simple. In most Asian cultures, even before white people were on the scene, there is a thing about equating pale skin to beauty. And frankly, this is something that happens in other cultures of people with more tan skin than us. So there is a beauty equivalent. So people always like to sort of, appear lighter than they are. They wear makeup to do that. And it's not to imitate white people per se. It's just that, it's the idea that people who, if you're out in the sun working out in the fields, you'll get these tans. You'll basically look lower class, whereas rich people who are able to look after themselves historically were typically more sheltered from the sun, and they would look paler. The other thing in the modern age is that if you show up for a job interview in Japan, it's not considered a good look to show up like you've been, on a surfing trip. And one thing I'm actually kind of honestly envious of Japanese is Japanese can get pretty white. If they want to hide from the sun and really protect, and some people are really paranoid about doing it, they can be as white as me. And yet, when I go surfing, I have to put 10 liters of sun cream on, whereas my Japanese friends go and put nothing on. Now they come out and they look like Naomi Osaka. I mean, the Japanese can naturally get really dark or really white. They've got this sort of skin that handles this. Whereas I've got skin from Yorkshire, that doesn't really deal with anything very well, other than maybe rain. So I've always been jealous of this. So this was a problem to me, because all the automatic machines that take ID photos, passport photos, resume photos, they all lighten the skin. They all basically take a photo, but they overexpose all the photos. And the idea is that Japanese people, when they put a photo on their CV, they always look paler. And this is equated to the idea that, you've been locked in a room studying and working hard. It contributes to the sense that someone is, diligent and trustworthy or whatever. And the idea of someone with a big smile and a suntan, even though of course even Japanese, from a basically long line of Japanese sort of background, there's deviation. There are Japanese with darker skin and Japanese with paler skin, just like everywhere else. But generally the photo machines lighten the skin naturally. So this was a problem for me as someone who, multi-time winner of worst tan contest myself. When I first came to Japan, I got my first gaijin card photo taken. All that came out was a white background and an overexposed photo of worst tan champion, and all that came out was my eyes and my nostrils and my mouth. I mean, it was like a cartoon where they forgot to draw the lines around the edge of my face. So yeah, I've experienced this as well. I mean, hell, they whitewashed me. And believe me, I don't need any more whitewashing than I already have. So yeah, I looked at the comments at the wrong time just now. So yes, it's basically, this is a thing that Japanese culture kind of does. They do it without thinking, because frankly, again, there's always this assumption that Japanese can sort of be a broad range of skin colors, and sometimes I'll show this in anime, but generally anime characters are portrayed lighter. And Nissin is saying, hell, we weren't even thinking about this. But that's kind of the problem. I do like to always point out sometimes it's better when someone is actually evil and racist than innocent and ignorant, because at least if you're evil, you're in control of it. You know that you're doing it, and you can know when to turn it on and turn it off. If you're ignorant, you don't know that you're doing it, so you don't know to turn it off, and that's kind of more of a problem. So what Bai has done is he's really he's actually expressed the voice, not just of the outraged foreigner not seeing it from a Japanese perspective, but actually what I really like about him, and what's important, and what makes this whole thing kind of significant, is that he's presuming to speak for, which again, he's stepping into shoes that are not his own perhaps, but he's presuming to explain it from the perspective of the multi-ethnic Japanese kids, particularly of African and dark-skinned heritage, that see her as a hero, and see her being held up as a hero to all their friends, and as someone who basically helps people who maybe are self-conscious about their appearance and their ethnic difference from their classmates and their peers, to be seen in a really positive light. And there's this huge opportunity from that she represents to these kids, and not just her. There are all of these other particularly in different fields of sports at the moment coming up. So many Olympic athletes in Japan now have multi-ethnic heritages, and this is an opportunity to make the lives of those ordinary kids that are not Olympic athletes or tennis champions, better, to give a hero that everyone sort of recognizes and says, yeah, you're like her, you're cool. And they've kind of robbed that chance to both her and those kids. And so yeah, the result of that was Naomi, actually kind of gracefully, it's a sponsor, and so in the sponsor felt terrible and pulled the ad, which unfortunately means that she's not going to get as much money from the advertising campaign, which is kind of a negative outcome from this, because the idea is the lesson from this shouldn't be don't sponsor Naomi by all means. It's as she's pointing out, she would love if they'd consult with her to make sure that the image is being portrayed appropriately, and perhaps this is a good lesson for Japanese advertisers to pay attention to this, where maybe they weren't in the past. So Bai has done a great job of raising this. It's been covered globally all over the world. It frankly, it looks terrible. It's not. I don't think it's as sinister or as bad as it looks, but at the same time, it is still dealing with a problem of ignorance that, as Bai himself has pointed out, at a certain point, it's like the blackface thing. People have said, well, we don't know about blackface in Japan. Well, the first 10 times, you can kind of say you didn't know, but people should know better. And perhaps, again, dealing with, this is Japan's first ever Australian Open winner, so perhaps they can claim this is new, but this is the situation where Japan is learning in baby steps to basically the right way to embrace, and the intention clearly was to embrace and promote and hold up Naomi Osaka. It wasn't to denigrate her or misrepresent her, but clearly they're learning the appropriate way to do that, and that's a good thing. We're all growing. But yeah, and the optics are terrible, and maybe the optics aren't quite as bad as they appear to be looking from overseas, but at the same time, the badness of the optics presents the opportunity to learn, so that's a good thing. So everything coming to a happy conclusion, you'd think, except I was going through the news this morning, and again, what's clearly a really well-intentioned article, and if I click on the link here, the article is now totally different. So you see the story here in Japanese. I noticed this in my Hatina bookmarks this morning. Osaka Naomi dake de wa nai. 今や日本スポーツ界のis that I should have checked this first. Is that 放映する多様人種アスリートの存在を考える. So there's one word that I tripped up on in the middle there, but basically this is a feature of it's not just Naomi. Check out all these other diverse multi-ethnic kids pulling along the success of Japanese sports. So a great story featuring all the other different multi-ethnic sports stars coming out of Japan at the moment. Great story to feature the day after Naomi won the tennis open. The problem is that the original story of this extremely positive story, the original title of this extremely positive story that was still showing up in the RSS feed that made me swallow my cornflakes for a moment, was, you can see there, Naomi dake de wa nai. 今や日本のスポーツ界を要因する非純血日本人. That literally means he or hai, that means not, it's an opposite. Jun means pure, and that's what's used for like when people talk about pure blood, and the next one is blood. So this is like Japanese with impure blood. It's like, wow, it's not just Naomi, there's all these other fantastic people who are Japanese with impure blood, let's look at them. Somebody fortunately corrected that title quickly, and instead said a diverse race. But yeah, it's still, unfortunately for them, it's still there uncorrected in the RSS feed, and I saw that and I was like, is this like a, yeah, someone commented, is this like a Harry Potter episode? So, you know, again, Japan, baby steps. Baby steps, but still fantastic news, and from my perspective as well. And the other thing, I did make a comment on the Naomi win. Not just great for her and for multi-ethnic kids in Japan, and not just in Japan, it's also, I mean, she is a multi-ethnic Japanese kid not in Japan, and of course this is the thing about people, we're all over the place, we don't always conveniently fit into countries. And again, Naomi's a great example of this. She's, for intents and purposes, American. She's grown up in America to a Haitian dad and a Japanese mum, so kind of three nationalities or three identities going on there. So she's of course inspirational to you know, Japanese kids of African descent who are and Caribbean descent and African American and whatnot descent in Japan and so on. You know, it's great to see someone successful who's praised and loved, and you know, it's a good, it opens doors for other people like her to follow, which is great. Also for, of course, Japanese abroad who often still struggle with their Japanese identity, to see someone like this being embraced in Japan, it's great for them too. But for all of that, I also think the thing which kind of I don't want to leave out of the narrative here is that this is so good for Haitian kids. And at the end of the day, Naomi played for Japan because Japan had the resources. You know, she could have chosen either one. She chose Japan partly because she's a Japanese citizen, but also because you know, Japan has a tennis team and they have the resources and the coaching and so on, the backing, the sponsorships, everything else. You know, Haiti doesn't have any of this. Haiti is one of the poorest countries in the world, and it's been through a ton of natural disasters, human disasters. It's a really struggling country, and the people there, you know, it's a country where the kids, you can imagine, don't see a lot of opportunity for people like them to be successful on the world stage. So the idea that a Haitian kid, which Naomi is, as much as she's Japanese, won the Australian Open and the US Open. I mean, this is something that I think Haitians should be celebrating, and people should be celebrating for Haiti as much as they are for multi-ethnic Japanese kids. Of course, I'm in Japan, I've got a multi-ethnic child. For me, it's great to see that, oh, isn't she doing great things for multi-ethnic Japanese? But fact is, the Haitians need her. You know, what she represents for Haitians is probably more significant even than it is for Japanese, although it's great for all those things. So as much as you want to say she's just a young girl, she's a tennis player, we shouldn't be putting all this pressure on her, I think we can still celebrate just all the great things. But she's aware of what she represents, and you know, and including with this whole kerfuffle. And so it's, I think she's stepping into that role with maturity ahead of her years, when she's being forced into the role, but she's, I think, embracing it the right way with humility, and she's being careful with what she says. Yeah, I think she's going to be a great influence for the next generations of Japanese who are definitely not homogenous like Japan's been until now. So all of that.